Hi, and welcome to Advancement Tech. Give me a few moments and I'll make sure that the stream is up and working properly. So just do a few things here. We are live on YouTube. I am monitoring chat, so feel free to sign up for a YouTube channel account if you want to chat something, and I will respond to your questions as I'm doing the presentation. All right, I'm going to be looking down at the chat that I have down over here, but things seem to be working well, so we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so this is Advancement Tech. We provide technology shows that cover advancement, nonprofit, and fundraising. So this episode 13, is Do You Need Two Monitors? So welcome, thank you for attending. First, I'm going to mention just a brief background about myself. We'll have about 15 to 20 minutes, probably closer to 15. This isn't as long a show. And then we'll have a Q&A period where you can ask questions. Okay, so who am I? My name is Creston Jameson. I've worked at 2 different universities over 12 years. In that capacity, I oversaw development services and advancement services, or advancement services. Since then, I founded a company and developed a product called Advancement Form, and that does online giving and event registration. Okay, so there's this quote and actually a title from an article called Dual Monitors Boost Productivity User Satisfaction. And this is actually from this PDF here from this article that was published looking at different studies. Now, a lot of these studies were commissioned by monitor manufacturers. This one's, for example, or they sell monitors. Like this one's commissioned by Dell. This one's commissioned by NEC. So, I mean, not to say that they are, you can judge for yourself whether that is biased or not. But it's just something to keep in mind as you're looking at this. So, this is kind of what I was hearing and going to different offices, be it a dentist's office or other types of offices, I would see so many people using dual monitors. Now, it predominantly use just a single monitor. I don't use dual monitors, so I wanted to investigate, well, when I was upgrading a computer, should I use 2 monitors? Should I use 3 monitors? Now, looking at some of the studies that I mentioned, a lot of them, they have about a 10% productivity increase from what they were looking at. And it can be higher for certain tasks, like copy and paste tasks. It was upper 40%, some productivity increases by having multiple monitors. Although a single large display approached those productivity gains, because with a larger display, presumably you could put things side by side and get close to the same improvement. And then something I mentioned before, frequently these studies are sponsored by the monitor manufacturers, so that's just something to keep in mind. Now, again, when I was looking at my computer and wanted to set it up, I asked the question myself, do I need multiple monitors? And, is this the best way to do it? Again, I saw people using them everywhere. Then there came the question, do I need 2? Do I need 3? What would be best? If I have 2, 1 to the side, where does that go? And then the question is, what would go on that second monitor? And how much would it really help? Would I have email on that? Would I have monitoring? So it was just the decision process trying to figure out how I would use it. And this kind of led me to decisions. So what should go on the second display? My email, monitoring something else. So like when I say monitoring, what I mean is we run the application called Advancement Form, which is an online giving and event registration platform. And we have various things monitored. Should that be on the display? We do have alerting set up, so that wouldn't be necessarily an absolute requirement, because if something goes wrong, there's an alert that's sent. But, what would make sense on that second monitor? Now, for example, if I put email there and I need to compose an email on the second display, do I bring that email back to the main display so that I'm faced centered on as I'm typing it, which would seem to be more optimal, or do I keep my head turned while interacting with the email? So these are just decisions that were going through my mind. And I kind of came to the conclusion is that if I did this most of the time, what I would put on that second display would be non-active work. And then how beneficial, I came to the question is how beneficial is that? There are certain cases where I might use it actively, like both monitors at the same time, and I'll get to some of that a little bit later. But most of the time I just work with one monitor. So most of the time the second monitor would just be for something I'm not actively working on. And this may be true for a lot of you as well. And then, of course, things that I had heard and things that I was reading is that sometimes this can lead to decision fatigue, where you say, what goes on the second monitor? What do I drag over? What do I, some of that, it takes place when you're kind of working with multiple monitors. You just don't have one. Now, the big thing that led me to my ultimate decision about what I was doing is the question of focus. So a single monitor allows focus. Like what I was saying before, things that are non-active, I'd probably put on that second monitor. But the problem with that is it produces a distraction. So if I'm trying to focus on something like do some design work or draft a document or do programming, I need focus work. And if some non-critical email pops up on a second display, my focus will be drawn towards that and I will lose focus on that. And the other thing is, what they say is that multitasking is a myth. We essentially do everything, focus on one task at a time, but we switch between them. But there's a cost to that switch, and how far you get into something depends on how quickly you can get back to it. And through my thought process, putting email or social media or monitoring on the second display will divert focus from my tasks because it's too easy to look over. It's better to have that, say, behind or hidden or closed, like email, social media, so that I could focus on the task at hand, be it drafting, writing a document, doing design work, doing programming, etc. And like I mentioned, if you become distracted, it takes time to regain it. I've seen reports as to get fully back into what you were before, many minutes. However, it depends on each person, of course, but it definitely takes time to get back to where you were once you're distracted with something. And there's an interesting book that I'm actually reading right now called Deep Work by Cal Newport, and it talks about the importance of focus and the importance of time to focus on a particular task that you're working on. And if you're interested in this and increasing your focus, this is definitely a book to check out if you're interested in it. But this question of focus and not being distracted is kind of what led me down to go ahead and stick with a single monitor and not use dual monitors. But then, of course, there are still people that use them and get great benefit from them. So, the question becomes, when do you need two monitors? Now, my perspective on that is that if you have a task that could benefit from keeping two areas open at the same time, then it makes sense. And I have a few examples here. If you're working on a document and you're copying and pasting between those documents, and it's advantageous to have both up on the screen, like they're large enough that it makes that easier, you could do that. Or if you have a large enough display that you could have two documents side by side, that is something else you could do as well. Another issue is that, now not all programming, but if you're programming something that you have say, what is called as a client server. So you have one part that's a client and one part that a server needs to see. Like, for example, you're making a chat application and there's someone who sends a chat and you want to receive it on the other end. I could see how having two monitors, through that development process, being able to see both at the same time would be advantageous. Another question is certain design work. Like if you're working on a large layout or on a web page, maybe you have your code on one monitor and then the results of that code on the other monitor. You can still, on a single monitor, do alt tabs between them, but I could see how situations that would be advantageous to have that much screen real estate as you're working on something, see changes live in real time. And now the other question is actually what I'm doing right now is producing live content. Basically, I'm live streaming this demonstration, and I am looking at the screen that you're looking at, but I have a secondary display set up. Now it's actually a separate computer system, a separate small laptop that I can look at and see the chat that's happening. So it makes it easier to be able to broadcast and have certain content off screen with what you're working with. So I can definitely see a use case for that because I'm actually doing it. The other use case that may warrant having two monitors is if your job responsibilities focus on making others productive. Now, I have an example here, a manager or customer support, meaning that if you as a manager, you feel that your job is to make others more productive and anything coming in like an email in Slack and you want to respond immediately in real time to what's going on, then I could see having a second monitor with those interruptions that are making other people more productive. And then as time allows, you fall back to another task maybe on your primary display. But I could see that as a potential use case. Or if you're in customer support where you exist to make your customers more efficient and you want to respond right away to customer requests coming in, I could see that that type of responsibility perhaps warranting, two monitors to make the job easier. So these were two areas that two types of tasks or responsibilities that I felt would warrant having two monitors. Now, it comes down to this question for me is that does a second display improve your work or does it distract you from it? So for example, if you're doing one of these types of jobs and maybe you have another job that fits into one of these categories as well, if this second monitor makes you more productive at that, then there's definitely benefit to it. Like I wouldn't be able to produce live content as well without having this second screen that I'm looking at. However, if it's something that distracts you from your work, so for example, if you're trying to work on a document and you have email on a second display or some sort of social media like Facebook or Twitter and things happen and you're distracted from it, then it may be a net negative for you to have that second monitor. And perhaps what you would want to do to be more productive and focused is to potentially only use that monitor in those cases where you're doing work that requires the benefit of having two monitors, and otherwise just perhaps turn it off. So I've seen some people that like to do that. All right, so that kind of talks about the question of should you use two monitors, as well as what my experiences have been and kind of what I decided. So how I'm doing it is I'm using a single monitor. It helps me focus a lot more, in my opinion, and not be distracted by other things. And I don't have to have a decision about what do I put on the second monitor and moving things around. Everything's just pretty much full screen and in focus with what I need to do. And certain responsibilities I have, like this live streaming, I bring up a actually second laptop that has a second screen on it to be able to address those particular functions. So at this point, if you have any questions for me, please go ahead and put them in the chat. And while I wait to see if there are any questions with regard to that, we do have an upcoming show. Now, normally we go live on Fridays at 4 p.m. Next week, I do have some appointments, so I'm not sure if it will be a live show, but I'm going to try to post a YouTube video with a next technology show and try to target around the 4 p.m. time period next Friday. So we'll see how that goes. All right, so I don't see any questions in the chat right now. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like and a subscribe on Facebook. We are looking to increase our audience. As well, if you want to get email notifications of new episodes, as well as what future episodes are, please head over to advtech.tv and you can sign up to put in your email, and you'll get a weekly email of the show that happened, the replay of it, as well as what we're planning to do for the future episode of the upcoming Friday, so you can see if you'd like to join us live or not. All right, I don't see anyone in the chat, so we will go ahead and close it out there. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll be presenting the show next Friday. Thanks.